Okay, one of those things that I keep getting, in this case recently from the psychologist that is very nice, very sympathetic, whom I have been visiting to resolve some of these perimenopausal issues, um, is the question. Well, why didn't anybody help you? Why didn't anybody? All the family, or the extended family, all the onlookers, anybody in the environment, why didn't somebody help you during those years of struggle? And I now count them as 2 decades. Fortunately, life itself has resolved the fundamental core issue, which was that my father had it in for me. Well, why didn't anybody help me? I think there is still a lack of understanding there, even dare I say it, with the psychologist, because my real situation doesn't fit into any Western paradigm. It doesn't fit into the explanatory systems of contemporary Western culture. It cannot, because I wasn't. Not only because I wasn't brought up in this contemporary Western culture, but because the influences that continued to rain down upon me were from a different setting, in a different culture, and had a different meaning and a different context. So the reason I think nobody helped me, and this includes people that were in a position to do so and should have helped me, is, I think, the Western paradigms of psychology and ideology, the ideology of individualism, and the psychology of the normative Western individual, which unfortunately is deemed to be the universal person. The psychology of the contemporary West, it extends beyond psychology. It has an ideological structure and agenda, and it deems that everybody is basically the contemporary Western individual. And that's why intellectuals as such would not help me, I believe. Also because they were cowardly. Some of them, one of them, okay. But it can look, unfortunately, it can look as if I wasn't worthy of being helped. And I sense, because of the very actually vicious and nasty criticisms that were implied against me in the past, that some people have viewed my circumstances in the light of, well, if nobody did help you, then it was because you didn't merit any help. Otherwise, we're all decent, rational, great, wonderful, intelligent people, and we surely would have helped you had you merited some help. Uh, and I cannot help, because I am intellectual and because I've been through that mill, I cannot help but hear the possibility of a criticism there. And I know it's probably not intended in this case, but I can't help but sense, oh, this is that Western paradigm again of, everybody is basically rational, everybody's basically logical, we presume it, and they're all well adjusted except you, and nobody helped you because you hadn't adjusted enough to merit their help, their condescending great grace from on high. If you had adjusted more, if you were more normal, if you could appeal to us in a rational way, we would have come galloping to your assistance, but you didn't. So I cannot help but hear that kind of criticism, and it's just too bad. But the actual circumstances are not in the order of what they may seem to be, even if we presume that they were more extreme, because the Western paradigm views things in a narrow psychological way and doesn't seem to understand so much about how psychological states can impact on physiology. There seems to be a mind-body distinction, a separation there, which makes it hard for those embracing Western psychology to say, well, oh, your level of, let's say, abuse, let's say, victimization, really got sunk deeply into your physiological condition, so that in a sense there wasn't any psychology that you could process. It was just a physiological reaction to abuse that you were experiencing during these years of your 20s. And so consequently telling you that that was abuse, or telling you not to feel guilty, hasn't any meaning, because the abuse had penetrated so deeply that it wasn't. It can't be responded to simply on that level of the intellect or the cognition or the realization. So although it is, of course, reassuring for me to hear, well, it wasn't your fault and that guilt belongs to somebody else, it's an optimistic view that would say, well, because you can understand that now the guilt is alleviated, or because you can understand it wasn't your fault, now you're free from it feeling like it was your fault. That doesn't quite work that way when it's a physiological reaction. So my physiological state is to, when I feel pain, to feel guilt. It's automatic. There's really a bypassing of the cognition for the most part. And it's difficult, I think, for a contemporary Westerner with the mind-body dualism to grasp that. I feel pain, I feel guilt. I shouldn't be in pain, because if I'm in pain, I've done something wrong, and I've deserved the pain, and I'm a terrible low-life person, and I should feel guilty, and I do. That's the mechanism of my mind. That is how I think I was trained by my father's very hostile and abusive conditioning of me. But I don't think it can be grasped. I don't think it can be understood within this Western paradigm that is the one that's always being used, the one that says, well, there is cognition on that side, and then you accepted the cognition, you accepted the guilt, and therefore you felt guilty. Absolutely not. Absolutely didn't accept it, always fought it. Hard to understand that. But I think what also is not understood is that it's not a narrow psychological issue either. When I was in my 20s, and I did succumb to the stress that was a stress of adaptation, and above all, and a stress of alienation, and just tremendous loss, because I had migrated at the age of 15, 16, and I lost everything that I had put my roots down into, and nobody explained to me what the new situation was. And it's just like, just adapt or suffer the consequences. So I did succumb to great stress, and I developed a very fragile physical condition. And I think what the would-be critics and those who would dismiss me as not meriting any help cannot understand is that wasn't a state of being where I became a whiny little baby and began saying, people, I condemn you, you don't help me, or I became emotionally reactive or anything in that manner that one might imagine could be the consequence of feeling some degree of pain or anguish or vindictiveness or something. That whole paradigm of the Western individual that reacts and acts out is not applicable either. What I experienced was such a physiological shutting down of my functioning that I was not able to express the emotional anguish of it really at all. So I think some people taking this Western paradigm to heart and viewing it as inevitable and the norm, would have held if they had thought. And I think some people, let us say without naming names, have thought a few negative things about me. They would have thought, well, she was just like overreacting and being emotional and acting out. But the the reality, I had no room for emotion. My emotions shut down almost completely. But above all, my negative emotions had to be shut down, and I shut them down. And it's really like supposing, well, you're in an aeroplane and one of the engines is on fire. So you shut it off, you shut it down. You don't want to feed that engine with any oxygen. You shut it down. It's what the pilots are trained to do. In effect, I felt I had a tremendous amount of rage, but I couldn't identify it as rage, and I couldn't identify its cause. Although now, belatedly, I have understood that the cause was very justified indeed. Because if you are abused, if your father abuses you, you should feel rage, and it's natural. But it was, for me, an engine on fire, and I could not allow that to burn out of control, so I shut it down. And I also shut down most of my other emotions. So when it came for me to say, well, I am in trouble here, can you not render a little bit of assistance? I think emotionally I was unconvincing. Emotionally, the words I was saying didn't match up with anybody's sense of urgency, because I had shut everything down that could cause me any harm. And in fact, unfortunately, for much of the time that I was in the gravest trouble, if I had given in to that emotion of rage or distress, anything negative or strong, my physiological state was so fragile. At that point, my immune system was so compromised that I would have succumbed to a level of viral infection and secondary infection that I simply would not have been able to cope with or recover from. So I had to save every little bit of energy by not losing control. Every tiny little bit. The survival margin was very, very thin for me. I could not afford to lose my sense of control, or to give in to a wild emotion by any means, or even a tame emotion. Not really. So I would ask people, well, wouldn't you see a way to help me? Can't you see this isn't right? This abuse and my father's aggression? And they would say, oh, doesn't seem so problematic to us. Or, well, there we go. Or she's just an evil white African person trying to get more than her share by making it all about her. So there was a lot of stigmatization and prejudice as well. That was another reason I was not helped. But I think just on that level of trying to make the emotion of urgency match with the degree of urgency I was actually experiencing, that's what I could not do. I was shut off from my emotion. I had to shut my emotion off. It was just too dangerous otherwise. And my father really shut down my negative emotions. My expression of loss, he shut that down. My expression, just like, be happy, get on with it. Doesn't matter if you've lost everything, you're a migrant, doesn't matter. You're just being a wuss. Or my expression of rage at him, that had to be shut down. That was very dangerous for me, to be angry at somebody that was really stronger than me, really would take it out on me even more if I showed rage. And fear, I shut that down. I shut down all those negative things. And then how do you appeal to someone on the basis of, well, I'm frightened, I'm angry. Well, anger, I tried to express anger. I did. I tried to formulate and express anger because I was trying to resolve the anger, and I knew at some point after I had been re-victimized, this time in the workplace, I knew at that point, suddenly I knew that I was very angry, I was very rageful, so I tried to let that out of me somehow without destroying me. When I had more maturity to deal with it, and I really tried, But the anger itself was penalized. You can't be angry at the system. You can't be angry at your father. You're not supposed to be an angry person. You're supposed to get on with it. So there were a lot of people penalizing my attempt to express what had been stored up within me for a decade or more at that time. No, you can't express anger. There's no situation that merits anger. Everything is just great. Everybody is rational except you. You're angry. Anger means you're not rational. It's a very, very bizarre paradigm, once again, a very bizarre cultural paradigm of blaming the victim. And so that's another reason that I did not get any help. But the very, very fragile physiological state was a huge one because I had to take care of it and not express things too roughly or in a mode that was going to upset me inwardly. The problem with my expression of anger is that I had internalized a reaction to it whereby if I expressed anger, I immediately felt ashamed and humiliated. And that was an internalization of my father's reaction to my anger. So I couldn't bring the real structure and image of the anger before my eyes without feeling I'm disintegrating and destroying myself. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. Oftentimes I would sense it was there. When I got sick, then I would feel my father's wrath against me suddenly appearing in my consciousness, and I would go, oh, I'm getting sick again. I'm guilty. I'm shameworthy. I'm getting sick again. This is disgusting for me to succumb to a virus. And that would actually put so much burden. The reaction itself, the feeling itself of shame and guilt would put so much burden on my system in addition to what was already there that it pretty much assured I could not recover from that virus, that the autoimmune system that I had, that had instilled itself in my body, would perpetuate itself on the basis of my own tension with regard to the shame and guilt of being sick. Such a vicious cycle. So I couldn't explain the shame and guilt of being sick because it would have overwhelmed me and made me feel like I should die and I should succumb to the sickness. And it was an automatic reflex reaction which was beneath the level of cognition, just automatically responding in that way, out of my control, as a little viral sub-program in my head that my father had put it there, conditioned me to have. So that was huge, that was awful, that was terrible. And there was another reason why people didn't come to my help, and I believe that it was I couldn't explain my father's aberrant behavior toward me, because people were like, well, fathers don't behave like that. We've never known fathers to behave in a vicious and unprovoked way toward their children. They just don't. And that was people's experience within their own culture. But I had come from a different culture, and more than that, worse than that, I had no explanation myself. I was too immature about understanding psychology, understanding the impact of history. I couldn't make any conjectures because I didn't know what it's like. Okay, you walk down the road at night and suddenly from behind you there's a looming figure. It's a guy that's going to mug you. He gets a knife, he holds it around your neck, and he says, yeah, give me everything, give me your money, give me your keys, give me your credit card. And you say yes. Now, what it's like is my father effectively mugged me, and then people said, well, why did your father mug you? And I said, well, actually, I don't know. And they said, that's not good enough. Why did he mug you? No, it doesn't make any sense. You're exaggerating. No father mugs their daughter. So tell us the reason and we might believe you. What's the cause? Otherwise you're making no sense about it. And I would go, what's the cause? What's the cause? And goodness me, I could make no sense of it because I was the victim in that. I'm not him. I wasn't in his head. I couldn't furnish a reason for his thinking processes just because I'm not him. And that was considered a sign of my guilt. Why don't you understand how other people think? Why haven't you developed so much in your psychology that you can appreciate their way of thinking and how you might be causing them to react like that to you? You seem so devoid of any logic to everybody else because you're not coming up with reasons that can make sense. You must be somebody that just doesn't care about anybody except yourself. Why can't you tell us? Why did he do that to you? Why don't you make sense of it for us? So that is another reason why people didn't help, because I couldn't give them a reason why I was experiencing this level of psychological abuse. So they were like, well, it doesn't make sense and we won't help you. In all sorts of ways, the presumption that the contemporary Westerner is a very compassionate, deeply logical, reasonable, ethical person that will respond to a genuine appeal. I think this is begging the question. I have not found that the contemporary Westerner is like that at all. I found that they bury their heads in the sand, they run away, they cut and run. You can't rely on them. And even if I did come up with a very, very good, deep explanation, I don't think those people would be available for me at all. It's just too hard an issue. It was a seemingly almost intractable issue, how to pull myself out of this emotional cut-off state and restore my own physiology, restore my own health. How to do that. It was a gravely difficult, harsh thing, especially as people continued to assert very negative, accusative things against me. During that time, I was trying to find ways or means to recover. So nobody helped me because people are not rational. They're presumed to be, but they're not, and they're not logical, and they don't understand history, and they don't care to. They don't understand complex psychology, and they don't have the paradigms to do so, and they don't care to. And it's easier to blame the victim, and they do care to do that. And it's costly for them to spend time on something that is difficult, that seems intractable. And also because it's convenient for people to have a scapegoat. And I think my family benefited from me being the whipping girl and, my siblings, and not them so much. And absorbing all the stress from migration and adjustment, that was my role and my allotted task, so they benefited. So there were very many reasons actually why no one came to my assistance, but I only know that now. In retrospect, I could not know that at the time that it was occurring because I was the victim. I didn't orchestrate those circumstances. I didn't conjure them up. I didn't like them. I didn't want them to be conjured up, but they were. And much to my regret, people, that I have assumed would empathize with me after I tried to explain this whole convoluted, confusing thing, from a victim perspective, not from somebody fully in the know, because I can never be someone that understands it from a godlike perspective, but tried to explain it from my own, limited perspective and expected their help. Those people were the worst. They betrayed me the worst. They just came up with the idea, or one person did, that I liked that victimhood. I liked that situation. That's something I enjoyed. Otherwise, why did I experience it? Why did that happen to me? So that person, I have nothing but contempt for that person because they're pretending to be knowledgeable and expert in ethics, and they're not. They're anything but. They're a coward, and they cut and run. So yeah, it's a very, very extreme circumstance that most Western people can't even imagine in a fit of Sundays. What's the expression? They can't imagine it. They have their severe limitations in terms of their own range of experience, which is mild, and they don't know, and they won't know, and they refuse to know. I was perhaps thinking of saying something else. I'm a little bit distracted. There's my neighbor taking off in his car. Let me just pause 1 second and I'll see if I can wrap this up. Yes, well, maybe what I can say is that the person that really upset me and really betrayed me implied that, oh, it was me. I was doing terrible things to my father just to make him feel depressed and sad. Um, that's a huge betrayal of my expectation and my trust, and really undermined my sense that anybody in the contemporary West knows what they're doing or cares to know anything more than that they currently know about their own lives and their own obsessions and concerns. Very narcissistic. And a good justification for a very lazy, narcissistic person not to do anything about what I was trying to impart. Yeah, okay. That's my current view, my more mature view about why nobody came to my help. That view has been formulated over a long time, and initially, when I was in trouble, I had no concept of why people were not able or unwilling to assist me. Uh, I think I can just leave it here. I think I did mention the problem with the limitations of the Western paradigm, the mind-body dualism, the tendency to make the victim account for the perpetrator and give a logical reason why they're being victimized. Which, of course, once you give the logical reason, then they say, "Aha! Now we know why you deserved it." So that's a lose-lose. My father abused me because, oh, well, why aren't you more sympathetic to him? Now, if you understand that poor guy, he's going through a rough time, but you know that's why he's doing it, so you should show your sympathy, and that's just not right. That you just don't care about his hardship and his difficulty, or you show no insight because you don't understand what he's going through. So it's a double-edged sword, but both of the sides are negative. Or I think they call it a double bind. Whatever you do is wrong. If you explain something, that shows that you should have known better. If you can't explain it, it's because you've got no insight. I'll leave you with that happy thought.